Welcome, everybody, to Postgame Takeaways with Inside ND Sports. I'm Tyler James, just steps away from my bed. He's the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for InsideNDSports.com on the Rivals Network. And we are here to share postgame takeaways from Notre Dame's 48-20 trouncing of USC. Eric, I'm not sure any of us could have predicted that kind of outcome on Saturday. What was your biggest takeaway from the win?
Well, there were so many. There were a lot of layers to this, but I would say the biggest takeaway was how the team responded to the adversity. I mean, this was a team that really could have gone sideways and had a lost season with a big resounding loss tonight on top of Louisville, and they pushed back on that and put themselves in a position for who knows what, but certainly not what we're thought. You know, I mentioned in my quick takeaways, which are not an instant analysis as they're labeled to be. They're not an instant, but it is an analysis. I think people were worried Notre Dame was turning into Nebraska. And what I mean by that is not only a team that wasn't going to end up in someplace relevant at the end of the season, but maybe was never going to do it again. I think that's how downtrodden a lot of the fan base was by the Louisville loss. But I think this USC win opens up some possibilities that Marcus Freeman maybe can get this thing fixed, and maybe there is a long-term future for him and his direction for this program.
Yeah, it's most impressive just based off of like what they were coming off of, the fact that this is the end of this 8-week stretch for Notre Dame, and having to play your best against a top opponent at the end of that, at the end of midterms week. It just seems like everything was sort of stacked against Notre Dame, except for the fact that USC was coming to town not exactly playing its best football either. And I don't think USC played particularly well on Saturday night either. But that doesn't certainly take away from Notre Dame's performance. I think defensive coordinator Al Golden is dealing right now. I think he certainly did a good job last year, but I thought at times the defense gave up critical scores that I thought really hurt the team in some moments. But this season, I mean, the defense has given you just about as much as you could ask for, even last week against Louisville,
right?
That they were put in such bad spots. It's just like USC's defense at some of the spots tonight. It's not like USC's defense played terrible.
They actually played pretty well.
They just didn't have many opportunities to play well. And then sort of staying on the defensive coaching, I think we may have overlooked sort of the job that Chris O'Leary, Notre Dame safeties coach, and Al Washington, Notre Dame's defensive line coach, have done. I think they've done a really nice job. O'Leary getting Xavier Watts to be, I mean, I think after tonight, a star safety for Notre Dame, right? I mean, he is the star of the back end for Notre Dame at the safety position. The defensive line hasn't necessarily produced the kind of numbers you would expect from a dominant defensive line, but they've done a lot of different things. I think the interior has surpassed expectations, and it seems like those end positions, especially Javonte Jean-Baptiste, are really coming along. And guys like Jalen Sneed are fitting in some pass rush situations. So I know we spent a lot of time last week killing offensive coordinator Jared Parker and the offensive coaching staff with some of the decisions that were going on, but I think it was worthwhile tonight to give some time to what the defensive coaching staff is doing, because that was quite the masterpiece that the defense put on display tonight.
Yeah, 11 tackles for loss, a season high, 6 sacks, 5 turnovers forced. You had sacks from really 7 different people. There were 2 guys that had half a sack, and that was Bertrand and Mills. But even Boubacar Traore, I don't know if he was even in another play in the game. He got a sack right at the end of the first half that USC was able to convert into a field goal, but not a touchdown. And had Notre Dame not been excessively celebrating that sack, it wouldn't even been that. The clock would have run out on USC. But I mean, Al Golden impressed me. Caleb Williams has never thrown 3 interceptions in a game.
Mm-hmm.
His pass efficiency rating was 100, which is very near his career low and is less than half of what he's been at as the nation's leading pass efficiency guy. The 301 yards USC got is the lowest since Lincoln Riley's been at USC, and I'm sure years before that I looked at 2021 and it was lower than anything they had done in that season, and then I kind of ran out of time and patience with that stat. But I mean, you can go on and on about the different things that were so impressive about that game, and really at all 3 levels. I mean, J.D. Bertrand had 9 tackles in the first half, finished with 11. There was just so much done right there. But I will say there were alarming things, not alarming, but disturbing things in the game too for me, that Notre Dame still has room for improvement. I mean, this isn't, okay, they're just going to waltz through the rest of the season.
Right.
You know, the 251 yards, total yards tonight on offense represent a Freeman era low, which is all of 22 games, but it is a low point. They had 12 men on the field and would have had a penalty for that, except it was offset by a USC penalty. And, you know, the celebration thing, you know, cost them 3 points essentially in a game that the 3 points weren't real important. And, you know, Jalen Sneed running into the punter on a block attempt. But I mean, just the way Notre Dame responded, and I give the offensive line a lot of credit. I mean, that was, USC wasn't a great defense coming in, but they did 2 things better than almost everybody in the country. They were 5th in the country in sacks.
Yep.
They were 1st in the country in tackles for loss. Notre Dame, you know how much lost yards they had tonight behind the line of scrimmage? 1 yard. 1 tackle behind the line of scrimmage for 1 yard.
Yeah, no penalties on that offensive line group. I thought particularly the time that they gave Sam Hartman on the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree was important, because Tyree was open, and that was a pretty easy throw for Sam Hartman to make with Sam Hartman's ability, but he has to have the time to be able to do that, and he was given that time in that instance, and they were able to connect for the long touchdown. That was a pretty important play in the game. The offense wasn't great, like you mentioned. It was opportunistic, turned all 3 of the interceptions into touchdowns, so that was important. And also, that does limit the yardage opportunity some. You're not going to be able to get many yardages on drives when you're starting so close to the end zone. But they did have, I think it was 3 3-and-outs, weren't able to sustain drives that you would like to see, especially against a USC defense that isn't good. This is not a good USC defense. So you should be able to sustain more drives against the Trojans. And the first 3rd down Notre Dame faced, they converted, which was a 3rd and 2. That was from the 4-yard line. That was the touchdown pass to Jabron Payne. I thought that was important because, okay, they not only scored, but they also converted a 3rd down, which has been an issue. I think they're around 21% the last 2 games. But still tonight, they were 3 of 10, 30% on 3rd downs. That's probably not going to be good enough unless you're really cutting down on that 3rd down number and not facing a lot of 3rd downs. So Notre Dame has to do a better job on 3rd down, but that's something that we've known as a problem. And like you said, these are issues that it's not like this is a huge win for Notre Dame, but if Notre Dame's offense reverts to what it was like in a couple of the previous games, you could lose just about any game, right? If Notre Dame's defense isn't forcing as many turnovers as it did tonight against USC, this game would have been a lot closer. And if Jadarian Price doesn't return a kickoff for a touchdown, it's closer. So you play with such a narrow margin for error if your offense isn't playing at a high level. So that's why there's going to still be concern about what Notre Dame is able to do on a game in and game out basis until the offense looks more consistent.
Well, this a team that certainly can use a bye week, and they get like a mega bye week in the fact that they don't have classes next week, so they can go home, and it sounds like they have plans to let the players go home for a few days get some rest. I mean, I really didn't see. I know Jaden Thomas played, but I didn't see him in there, so it must have been a handful of plays.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that pretty close, and I just didn't see 83 shuffling in there. So getting guys like him back and getting some fresh legs on some other players, I mean, that's going to be huge for Notre Dame, which plays a Pittsburgh team when they come back from the bye week that smacked down Louisville 38-21 in Pittsburgh tonight. So, but I think it's going to be really interesting where this team goes. And I really thought it was a cool moment for Sam Hartman to really, I mean, he wasn't the star of this game by any means. He was more opportunistic than he was, a catalyst in this game. But it was really neat to see the impact the game had on him. And I think he's going to take that with him over the remainder of the season. And I think they still can do something impressive. And again, it was a great game to be impressive because there were a whole bunch of recruits that were impressionable that were on the sideline tonight.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of fruit this recruiting weekend bears. We'll start hearing more for some recruits on Sunday, and trying to figure out what may be happening here soon or later for Notre Dame's recruiting classes. The biggest visitor on campus this weekend was 2024 tight end Carter Nelson, a 4-star recruit, the number 6 tight end in the country, who's committed to Nebraska. He committed to Nebraska in June when Notre Dame was in pursuit of him after he officially visited Notre Dame, but they were able to get him back on campus for the USC game. He got on campus and surprised the Notre Dame commits with his presence. That was part of what he wanted to do. So we'll see how that visit went and how the other visits went, and we'll have plenty of updates about those recruits on the Insider Lounge and InsideNDSports.com for myself and Charleston Bulls in the days coming. Any more takeaways from tonight, Eric?
I thought it was cool to see Joe Montana at the stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's been real early in the Brian Kelly era. There was a dust up between those two, and he hadn't been even at a Notre Dame away game or neutral site game until he was at the Navy game earlier this year. And then to see him in Notre Dame Stadium, that was pretty cool. But yeah, a much needed bye week. And then it's going to be really interesting to see how this season plays out. But I am caffeinated and here for you all.
Yeah, and Sam Hartman was pretty pumped up to meet Joe Montana too. He slipped that in during his post-game interview of just sort of how cool this whole moment was for him, and he was really soaking in the fans in the tunnel because there was a field storming, so there's all the fans like coming up the tunnel to get out of the stadium. So a pretty neat post-game moment for Sam Hartman and for Marcus Freeman as well. All right, that'll do it for our post-game takeaways. Make sure you check out the rest of our post-game coverage on InsideNDSports.com. If you're not a subscriber to the site, you can use the promo code NDYT to sign up for a 30-day free trial. Look for the link in the video description below, and we'll see you back here Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern for Football Never Sleeps.